The great American prairie once trembled under the weight of millions of bison. Their herds, stretching for miles, were a force of nature, a thunderous river of life that shaped the land and the people who lived on it. But this ancient rhythm was broken by a deliberate and brutal campaign. In the 1800s, the United States government saw the bison not as a majestic animal, but as a barrier to westward expansion. They understood a simple, harsh truth. To control the plains, they had to control the source of life for the Native American tribes. So, they decided to eliminate the bison, and they found willing partners in the hide hunters who swarmed the West. The government's support for this slaughter was both direct and devastatingly effective. They armed hunters with powerful rifles, and stories tell of the U.S. Army supplying free ammunition to anyone willing to shoot a buffalo. Special trains were run for tourists and hunters, who would fire indiscriminately from the windows, leaving countless carcasses to rot under the sun. This was not a hunt for food or resources, it was a systematic extermination. The goal was to sever the deep connection between the Plains tribes and the bison, a bond that was spiritual, cultural, and economic. By destroying the herds, they aimed to destroy a way of life that had existed for centuries. The impact on Native American communities was catastrophic and immediate. For generations, the bison had provided everything: meat for sustenance, hides for shelter and clothing, bones for tools, and a central place in their spiritual world. The animal was a sacred relative, a provider that sustained them through harsh winters and celebrated with them in times of plenty. The sudden disappearance of the herds plunged these nations into starvation and despair. Their entire world, built around the seasonal movements and generosity of the bison, collapsed. It was a cultural wound that ran as deep as the loss of land and life, leaving a void that could never be truly filled. By the late 1880s, the thunder had fallen silent. The once unimaginable number of bison, estimated to be as high as 60 million, had been reduced to a few hundred survivors. These last remnants hid in remote valleys and inaccessible corners of the West, ghosts of a former world. The great engine of the plains had been deliberately dismantled, leaving behind a landscape scarred by absence. The slaughter had achieved its grim purpose, paving the way for railroads and settlements, but it came at an almost unbearable cost. The near extinction of the American bison remains one of the most shameful chapters in the nation's environmental history. From the brink of total annihilation, the bison began a slow, tentative journey back. A handful of conservationists and private citizens recognized the tragedy unfolding and gathered the few remaining animals to protect them. These small, isolated herds, sheltered in places like Yellowstone National Park and on private ranches, became the seed from which a new population would grow. Over the next century, their numbers increased, but the bison that returned was a different creature in a different world. It was no longer a wild, free-roaming giant, but a carefully managed species, a ghost of its former self living within the confines of fences and human oversight. Today, the vast majority of the approximately 500,000 bison in North America do not roam free. Only a small fraction, perhaps less than 5%, live in wild conservation herds in parks and preserves. The rest are raised on private ranches, part of a growing agricultural industry. This reality creates a strange paradox. The animal that once symbolized the untamed wilderness is now primarily a form of livestock. While this commercial interest has been crucial for boosting bison numbers, it also changes our relationship with the animal. It is now a commodity, its value measured not just by its ecological importance, but by the price of its meat on the market. The high price of bison meat reflects its unique status as a gourmet product. It is leaner than beef, rich in protein and iron, and has a slightly sweeter, cleaner flavor that appeals to health-conscious consumers. The cost is driven by several factors. The bison industry is small and specialized compared to the massive beef industry, meaning economies of scale are limited. Furthermore, bison take longer to mature than cattle, and their raising is often more labor-intensive. Ranchers who focus on ethical and sustainable practices invest more in land and care, and these costs are passed on to the consumer who is looking for a premium, responsibly sourced product. This shift from wild animal to high-end food source has fundamentally altered the bison story. It is a tale of survival, but one that is complex and filled with contradictions. The demand for bison meat has provided a powerful economic incentive to increase the population, saving it from the edge of extinction. However, it also means that the animal's future is tied to its profitability. The bison now exists in a space between wildness and domestication, a symbol of both ecological recovery and the ever-present influence of the market. Its survival is assured, but the nature of that survival is still being defined. Raising bison is fundamentally different from raising cattle. Most bison ranchers embrace a philosophy of minimal intervention, seeking to honor the animal's wild instincts. They provide large, open pastures that allow the herds to roam and graze naturally, mimicking their historical patterns on a smaller scale. Unlike cattle, bison are not typically subjected to routine vaccinations, hormone treatments, or antibiotics. They are hardy animals, well adapted to the harsh climates of North America, and they thrive when left to their own devices. This hands-off approach respects the bison's inherent wildness and results in a healthier animal and a more sustainable ranching system. This commitment to natural behavior extends to every aspect of their management, including the controversial practice of harvesting. Many progressive ranchers have adopted a method known as field harvesting. Instead of trucking the animals to a stressful, unfamiliar slaughterhouse, a trained marksman culls a single animal in the pasture. This method is considered far more humane as the bison dies instantly in its familiar environment, unaware and unstressed. The rest of the herd is not disturbed, and the quality of the meat is preserved from the adrenaline and cortisol that can be released during traditional processing. It is a practice that attempts to bridge the gap between agriculture and a respectful death. The bison industry remains a niche market, intentionally small and focused on quality over quantity. The ranchers who dedicate their lives to these animals are often driven by a deep respect for the bison's history and its role in the ecosystem. They see themselves as custodians of the species, balancing the demands of a business with a commitment to ecological integrity. This ethical framework is a key part of the bison's modern identity. Consumers are not just buying meat, they are buying into a story of conservation, responsible land management, and a return to a more natural way of producing food. This careful stewardship creates a powerful connection between the land, the animal, and the consumer. Bison grazing helps restore prairie ecosystems, as their grazing patterns promote the growth of native grasses and increase biodiversity. By choosing to raise bison, these ranchers are actively participating in the ecological recovery of the Great Plains. Their work represents a paradox. They are running a commercial enterprise, yet their practices often align more closely with conservation than with conventional agriculture. They are farming a wild animal, and in doing so, they are helping to heal a landscape that was broken over a century ago. The story of the bison's recovery is a story of conflict, a tug-of-war between conservation and commercialization. On one side are the efforts to restore bison as a wild keystone species, reintroducing them to public lands and tribal territories where they can once again roam freely and shape the ecosystem. These initiatives, led by groups like the Intertribal Buffalo Council and various conservation organizations, aim to heal the historical trauma inflicted upon both the bison and Native American communities. For them, the bison is a cultural and ecological icon, and its ultimate salvation lies in its return to the wild, free from the constraints of fences and markets. On the other side stands the private ranching industry, which has been undeniably successful in growing the bison population. Commercial demand for bison meat has created a powerful economic engine for its survival. Ranchers argue that their work provides a practical and sustainable future for the species, ensuring its numbers remain robust while also promoting regenerative agriculture and restoring prairie health. They see their role as essential, providing a model where an animal can be both a symbol of the wild and a source of ethical, high-quality food. Without the market, they contend, the bison would never have recovered to its current numbers. This debate forces us to ask difficult questions about what it means to save a species. Is it enough to simply have more bison, even if most of them live behind fences as livestock? Or does true conservation require restoring the animal to its rightful place as a wild, self-sustaining force of nature? The answer is not simple, and likely lies somewhere in the middle. Both conservation herds and private ranches play a role in the bison's future. They represent different paths toward a common goal, ensuring that the thunder of the herds is never silenced again. The challenge is finding a balance where both paths can coexist. Ultimately, we are left with a profound question about our relationship with this magnificent animal. As we consume bison burgers and steaks, are we honoring its legacy by participating in a system that has secured its survival? Or are we simply continuing a long history of commodification, turning a sacred symbol of the American wilderness into just another product? The bison has returned from the brink, but its spirit remains caught between two worlds. Whether we are truly saving the bison for its own sake, or for ours, is a question that will continue to define its future on the plains.